Welcome to the Advancing Excellence podcast. In this episode, we welcome back Scott Greenhaus to discuss why mental health is such a critical topic in the construction industry. Join me as we begin the podcast.
Welcome to the Advancing Excellence podcast, where we explore innovation, leadership, and the challenges shaping industries today. I'm your host, Janice Kleins, Marketing Manager for AOE, and today we're tackling a critical topic, mental health in the construction industry. I'm thrilled to welcome back Scott Greenhaus, Senior Advisor with Structural Group and Principal of SMG Solutions, LLC. You may remember Scott from our previous episode, Hard Hats to Helmets, Advancing Safety in Construction, where we discussed the evolution of head protection and safety innovation. This time, Scott joins us to discuss the mental health challenges facing the construction industry, from the stigma surrounding mental health to actionable steps companies can take to support their teams. With decades of experience in engineering, safety, and leadership, Scott brings a wealth of knowledge to this important conversation. Welcome back, Scott, and thanks for joining me again.
Thank you.
So let's start with the big picture. Why is mental health such a critical issue in the construction industry?
Well, I'm happy to be here and talk about this really important topic. And I think, as everybody knows, mental health and deteriorating mental health is a big issue for the people at large, and it's particularly acute in the construction industry. And the construction industry is, somewhat unique. There's some pressures that occur in the construction industry where people move from job to job very often. Certainly, there's long hours and fatigue are part of the issues that construction workers face. It's a very manual type of work, and that could lead to chronic pain. And culturally, it's a tough it out sort of macho culture. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And that discourages help seeking, productivity issues. I mean, we definitely face these in other walks of life, but certainly if you put those together with the safety concerns, sort of a normalization of substance use, difficult working conditions, these all work together to create a high-risk environment that affect the mental health of the construction workers.
So it's my understanding that the construction industry has one of the highest suicide rates. Can you share some of the factors contributing to this alarming statistic?
Yeah, so this, as you mentioned, I've spent decades, like 4 of those, 40 plus years in the construction industry. And one of the things, being a high hazard industry as it is, we focused on serious injuries and fatalities that occur from construction incidents and accidents that happen, obviously far too often on construction sites. There's heavy equipment, there's structural issues. A lot of things contribute to the risk working at heights that construction workers face. And so there's about 1,000 construction workers a year. This number, unfortunately, has been pretty steady over the last decade or so, that die in construction accidents and incidents across the United States. When some of the statistics regarding deaths that are attributed to mental health concerns came out, and I became aware of these, obviously they were there, but I became aware, and the general industry became aware of this within the last decade or so. And those statistics, so as I mentioned, there's 1,000 construction workers die from accidents, greater than 5,000 construction workers die by suicide, and over 15,000 construction workers die from opioid and substance abuse overdoses. So this was very shocking. These multiples, 5 times, 15 times as many die by suicide and opioid and substance overdoses than by construction accidents. And rightly so, we spent a tremendous amount of effort and time trying to do something about the death from these high-risk activities in construction. And meanwhile, what we didn't see was all of the deaths that are occurring that relate to mental health. And so in construction, there's sort of a perfect storm of risk factors, some that I talked about previously, cultural stigma, physical pain, because it is a very labor intensive type of work. So there tends to be injuries, both acute and chronic, moving from job to job, substance use and abuse, and a limitation of support, which significantly elevate the suicide risk in construction.
Okay. Gosh, that's just large numbers. So earlier you mentioned the culture of toughness in construction. How is this impacting a person's willingness to seek help?
Yeah, it's a big impediment to getting the help that one would need. And I guess, when you think of most people think of construction, they think of the rough and tumble construction worker, who's, necessarily it's a tough job out there. It's tough work. And and historically it has been a tough sort of macho culture that pervaded the construction industry. And so that sort of stigmatization has led to help seeking as a weakness. There's fear of those construction workers of having negative job consequences. Maybe I won't be able to advance. Maybe I won't be able to keep my job. Others will judge me as being weak. Any expression of emotional unhealth is very often stigmatized or dismissed. So there's a lot of pressure to feel bulletproof, just push through the stress or pain or fatigue. And then that hidden suffering becomes normalized and leads to unhealthy coping mechanisms such as alcohol and opioids. And I think also importantly, the leaders really model vulnerability, so that sort of reinforces this culture of silence and not speaking out about it.
Okay. So during the pandemic, mental health challenges became even more pronounced. How did COVID affect the mental well-being of someone working in the construction industry?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, as you can imagine, it didn't help. I think we all suffered a lot of mental anguish during COVID. Am I going to live or die? I mean, most of us don't face that every day. And, going to the store could be one of your last, actions to go get some food. So I think the mental health for everybody deteriorated during this time. And so what happened during COVID-19 is it only built on the already existing issues that I described previously. So some of the things that tended to make mental health even worse in the construction industry, it was deemed after some back and forth over the first couple of months an essential service. So construction workers were expected to keep working, which was good and not so good. There was income coming in, but the construction workers were exposed to this horrific virus that nobody knew too much fear about, to know too much about. So the fear of contracting a virus for yourself or bringing it home to your family added to the strain. Schools were closed, and so who's taking care of the kids or the elderly parents? So those added to the stressors that were there for your work responsibilities. And certainly we're concerned about whether the jobs were going to keep going, whether we're going to be laid off. That increased the stress. Quarantines and limited crew interaction, and how I was going to work with my fellow people. What was the right protective gear? I remember on our crews, we do a lot of demolition work, create a lot of silica dust. So we have a significant amount. Our people are used to working in respirators, but a lot of our respirators that we had, N95 respirators, we gave to hospitals because, as you remember, there were shortage of respirators. So, what was the right way to protect yourself And certainly all these things, substance abuse. I think everybody was drinking more during those times. Um, so these all contributed to just making the situation even that much worse.
So let's talk about stigma. Why do you think mental health is such a taboo topic in construction, and how can we break down these barriers?
Yeah, so as we mentioned, there's this sort of tough macho culture in construction, and that is really a function of the type of work. Um, Productivity is really important in construction. It's important in any business, but schedules are tight, budgets are tight, and the pressure to be productive, yeah, and pushing through and being self-reliant is incredibly important in the construction industry. And the other thing that is such a challenge in construction is, the construction job must go on, and construction workers work in all types of environment. So whether it's 20 below, 120 above, everything in between, rain, sleet, snow, it's like the mail delivery guy. The construction workers work in all these environments. So it is there are tough environments. And so the workers are expected to be tough, like the environments that they work in. And, but we're all human, and we have emotional issues and other things that everybody has. But it's not a type of environment where those things have historically been easy to talk about or shared. And, so that's led to this, stigma associated with, challenges to mental health in the construction environment.
And where does the leadership and company culture come into play? Like, how is that in reducing the stigma?
Yeah, it's all about leadership and culture. So, when I stress this is so much about safety, and a lot of other things in a company are built on the culture of the company. It all starts with culture. So policies and procedures, those are all great, but the culture has to be to support a safe work environment. It has to be a core value of leadership, and nothing will happen unless leadership is on board and actively promotes and normalizes mental health conversations, just like we've pushed the industry to promote physical safety discussions at all times. Leadership can help focus on training leaders, field leaders, and themselves to recognize and respond to mental health challenges. Leadership can certainly help to make resources available and visible so people know about them. And I think importantly, leaders can model vulnerability also. And it's scary for leaders because, you're supposed to be invincible as a leader. But, I've seen, many instances, and, I try to model this myself, where we communicate vulnerability to others, and that is really important to creating conversations that are more open and supportive, and get to people really talking to each other with and taking the fear out of those conversations. So not, again, nothing will happen without leadership really focusing on this, recognizing it as an issue. And if you think about the statistics I mentioned before, I mean, how could you not
Right.
recognize this as a significant issue?
No, I couldn't agree more. Okay, Scott, you've been a strong advocate for total worker health. Can you explain what this approach entails and how it can improve mental health outcomes?
Yeah, so we've historically just focused on physical health, and mental health and wellness was either the purview of the HR department or not talked about at all. We're not here to fix your problem, your mental health problem. And that certainly was an impediment to anything getting done. And total worker health is really looking at the whole person, both the physical workplace safety, the psychological safety and mental health, and well-being of the individual. And going as far as how are you eating, how are you sleeping, what types of drugs are you taking, how does that impair uh, your ability to perform. And we've learned a lot about wellness and sleep, how incredibly important sleep is to physical and mental health. And so we have to rely on the studies that have been done in the mental health and physical health community that tell us about things that help support these healthy behaviors for people, creates resilience, and it really fosters a culture where mental health is viewed as highly as physical safety. And that's one of the things that those of us that are really focused in this area and one would like the listeners to take away with is, our goal is to work towards mental health being valued as highly as physical health.
Correct. I couldn't agree more. Access to resources is often a challenge. What are some practical steps organizations or companies can take to provide better mental health support for their teams?
Yeah, so the companies can support this by making the resources that are there visible and easy to access. There's training programs out there for leaders in mental health and suicide awareness and prevention. So it's making the investment in those training programs and allowing people to go and be trained at, not as clinical psychologists, obviously, but be able to look at warning signs, and certainly normalizing these conversations about mental health is critical, and certainly making sure that when someone seeks support, that support is confidential. Um, Companies can help by establishing peer networks, have flexible options like telehealth to help workers get help without fear. And fear is a big impediment, as we know, to getting anything done, and it could be sort of a negative motivator as well. So, working to embed mental health into the company's workplace culture, just like physical health, reinforces the fact that seeking help is really a strength. It's not a weakness.
So, how can companies encourage their employees to utilize employee assistance programs and other resources?
Yeah, I think that needs to come, from leadership, from operations, and as well as human resources. And look, in the construction industry, the vast majority of companies are smaller companies, less than 100 people, 50 people. Larger companies have resources. They have deep HR departments that are there for help and directing people to employee assistance programs. And, regarding employee assistance programs, I mean, they are there to help with these types of issues, both for the employees and very often for their families. But most employees don't know about it. Some EAPs are better than other, that's for sure. So I would encourage those of your listeners to look at their employee assistance programs, ask questions, make sure they're up to speed. But those EAPs and other resources could be really there to um, to answer questions, to confidentially discuss issues, help to establish wellness campaigns, and provide a positive reinforcement to the individuals. Because as I said, we're not all experts in mental health. And we don't want to be, but we want to be educated enough to be aware that there is trouble and be able to point people in the right direction. And that's why we've also formed what's called the Construction Mental Health Alliance. Put a little plug here. That's www.constructionwellness.org. And the purpose of the Construction Mental Health Alliance is, is to provide the kind of information people need about mental health issues in construction in one place. Can be very confusing out there looking for the proper answers. And so we're all working together with various other associations also to make sure people are educated and have the resources they need to address these issues.
So let's talk about substance abuse, particularly opioids. It's a major issue in construction. How does this tie into mental health and what can be done to address it?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, opioid abuse is typically tied to the chronic pain and also to untreated mental health issues. So there's alternatives to pain medication other than opioids, and I recall when this opioid crisis first became an issue. This about 20 years ago, and we had construction crews working in one of the hotbeds of the opioid crisis in the eastern U.S. And we didn't know what was happening. We knew crews were theoretically, or what they've told us, they were getting hurt, and they were going to their physicians and asking for oxycodone and other opioids. And but we didn't see the big picture. And I recall watching news-related shows at the time. There were about 50,000 opioid deaths when this started to come to light, and it was a crisis at that time. It's like, oh my God, 50,000 people. And that's not just in construction. This is in all walks of life. Since then, I believe last year, the year before, the number was more like 100,000. So the situation has only gotten much, much worse, twice as bad. And that's because, the opioids are now not as pure as they were. They're laced with fentanyl and other deadly compounds. So it's certainly a huge issue. So getting the message out there that we're having substance use support, that supervisors are trained to spot, and their peers are to spot warning signs, and making sure there's confidential access to treatment, and making sure that we're promoting healthy coping strategies, and again fostering a culture where if you're out there seeking help, that's a strength and not a weakness.
So let's talk about the importance of peer support programs. How can these programs make a difference, and what does an effective peer support program look like?
Yeah, I look at a peer support program is a network, a trusted network of people that you can talk to about your stress or mental health or personal challenges. And if we recognize that peer work networks can be a very strong contributor to our battle against poor mental health, we could train our peers to make sure that they recognize the early warning signs of mental health challenges and provide emotional support, and most importantly, guide their fellow workers to professional resources such as counseling or to EAPs. And if we could reduce the isolation by normalizing, this help seeking and create more trust, these programs will improve the mental health and well-being of the construction worker.
So for organizations or companies looking to implement mental health initiatives, where should they start? What's the first step in creating a supportive environment?
Well, again, it starts with leadership, and the culture has to support any health or safety initiative. So leadership has to commit to this. They have to understand how important their people are. They have to prioritize mental well-being alongside safety. So yes, the construction business is there to make a profit, to provide employment for people, and you could do that. I mean, if you think about the cost of mental health, of poor mental health, the cost of not people not showing up for work, lack of productivity. I mean, these are real business issues that impact the bottom line. So not only is it the right thing to do, it's good business. So the companies can make an investment, and the return on investment is very high. I've seen numbers as high as 4 to 1. You put $1 in for safety and mental health, you get $4 in return. Those things are hard to measure, but clearly the value is there in building peer support groups, training, using EAPs, and integrating mental health into everyday practices.
Finally, Scott, what's the key takeaway for our listeners? What can we all do to prioritize mental health in the construction industry?
Well, I think one thing I'd like our listeners to take away is that this is a significant issue that must be addressed. I mean, the statistics tell it all. People outside the construction industry and people inside the construction industry are shocked when I tell them that for every year 1,000 construction workers die, 5,000 die by suicide, 15,000 die by opioid abuse. So it's clearly such a significant issue that we've really turned a blind eye to. And so it's having these conversations. The more we have these conversations, the more the stigma is reduced, the more leadership encourages these conversations. The leadership shows vulnerability. And one of the things we like to say in construction is now it's okay to not be okay. And if we can get to the point where people really believe that, and I think we have a long way to go. I mean, you could say that, but to actually believe it and practice it is not so easy. But that is what I'd like the listeners to think about. It's okay to not be okay, to seek help. And that's only going to happen if we destigmatize mental health and poor mental health and normalize these conversations. So, I, as an individual, I'm not alone. I can go and get help, improve my life, improve my life, the life of my coworkers, my family, and my friends. And that's really what it's all about. We're all here. Work in the construction industry because we love it. It's exciting. It's interesting. We're building something. And we don't have to forsake our health, both physical and mental health, in order to be part of this industry.
I love it. Thank you, Scott. Thank you for sharing your insights and expertise on this critical topic. Mental health in construction is an issue that affects all of us. It's clear that change starts with awareness, compassion, and action. All of the resources discussed in this podcast will be linked in the description. And to our listeners, thank you for tuning in to this episode. If you found this conversation valuable, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with your network. Together, we can build a safer, healthier future for everyone in the construction industry. Until next time, stay safe, stay strong, and keep advancing in excellence. Thank you, Scott.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of the Advancing Excellence podcast. If you have any comments or questions, please get in touch with us at info@aoeteam.com. Don't forget to follow AOE on LinkedIn at Advancing Organizational Excellence, and be sure to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.